Bob Harig is here, Sports Illustrated. Bob, it's been about a year. We talked around this time last year for Bay Hill. I love having you on this time of year to talk API and Bay Hill. How was your week at the API?
It was interesting as usual. A lot going on. You know, pretty interesting weekend. Surprising conclusion. Hard golf course again, and we had a little bit of news earlier in the week also, which seems to be the case now from week to week with what's going on outside the ropes.
That's one of the main things I wanted to talk about. I thought you've done some excellent reporting over the last week or so on the merger talk, what's going on behind the scenes with the merger, the rumors that I had been hearing as well that I'm curious to talk to you about in terms of LIV players potentially being able to play at TPC Sawgrass, which is obviously not going to be in the cards this week with LIV Singapore going on in the other side of the world. But what's the buzz been about at these tournaments, man? I mean, you're one of my favorite people to talk to because you've been in the trenches with the PGA Tour doing this for years. You're one of the most trusted reporters that I know on the grounds, actually breaking some real news out there. And I got to imagine for you, this is still one of the wilder times in your career and in your many years of doing this.
Yeah, there's been nothing quite like this. I mean, golf is not typically a transactional sport. I mean, the NFL free agency kicked off today. What are we, a month past the Super Bowl? And those guys are having to track that. That's not stuff we've had to deal with in golf much. Transactions were about club equipment or, a golf course opening or the tour moving to a new venue or signing a sponsorship deal. This is a whole nother level. And frankly, you've got one side that really doesn't give up a whole lot. The LIV folks are great to deal with, but they are not, if they know, they have done a great job of keeping it quiet because the PIF, the Public Investment Fund, doesn't appear to be sharing the info with them, the people on the ground. And so a lot of this comes from the PGA Tour side. And look, you have to sort of step back and wonder sometimes where they're coming from. But the bottom line is about a month ago, there was considerable optimism that they were close to a deal based on the statement that the tour released after the first White House meeting on February 4th. On February 6th, they came out with a statement. The following week, Jay Monahan, the commissioner, met with us at Torrey Pines. And his words were had so much more meaning than they've typically had. Whenever, like tomorrow at the Players Championship, when Jay talks to the media, my sense is he's going to say a lot and it's not going to mean much. He's going to talk and try to avoid the subject. He's not going to really give you any detail. He was giving us detail. He talked about one tour, the best players coming back together. That's what the fans want. Of course, we didn't know what that meant. We had no idea exactly the physical way that was going to occur, but it sounded positive. Then Tiger, who also very rarely gives up anything, said something similar when he was on the CBS broadcast at Torrey Pines. So you come out of that thinking, okay, something's about to come down. And there was a considerable optimism that when they went to the meeting for the White House, for the second meeting, which was, I believe, on February the 20th, that there was going to be some sort of, there's agreement in principle type of a situation coming out of that. And instead, what came out was a very kind of stoic, cryptic, news release statement that really kind of suggested it didn't go very well. And since then, Jay tried to backpedal from that last week, but clearly the tone is different. And Rory in the media center last week said, it takes two to tango. So what does that suggest? He's clearly saying, he didn't say it out loud, but he's clearly suggesting that the PGA Tour has come to some certain point. I'm not saying the middle, just they've moved off their position somewhat, and he doesn't feel that the PIF has. And a lot of the rumblings is that the PIF believes firmly in team golf, that they believe firmly in their 14-event structure. Now, is there some middle ground where there's team golf and LIV exists as is with only 10 events or 8? From where I sit, it seems like you need to get to that point. Like the tour's original stance was to eliminate LIV altogether. I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
They're in their 4th year. They've spent all this money. They're hiring all these people. So that doesn't seem realistic. Okay, but how do you get to the point where this works? I see this all the time. Just let them play. Well, the tour just needs to let take away the bans. Though then they have damaged their own ability to have their product appeal to their sponsors and TV partners. So if LIV requires their guys to play 14, all 14, why can't the tour require their guys to play a minimum of 15, which, by the way, includes the majors in the Ryder Cup or the President's Cup? So you were talking about the top guys, right, that it matters the most to. So that really means they're only having to play 10.
Yeah.
So and so 10, 14, throw in the 4 majors, 18, the Ryder Cup. Well, first of all, if you play their 14 and then you play the tour's 15, which includes the majors and the Ryder Cup, you're up to 29.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's workable. I don't think it's doable. I think whatever you have has to sort of be capped at 25. And also, that idea doesn't allow for any PGA Tour player to really be a significant member of the DP World Tour, which is supposed to be involved in this, because you're supposed to play 4 there. So, like a guy like Hatton and Rahm and Patrick Reed, who've played on the DP World Tour, if they want to play the PGA Tour, which the PGA Tour should want them to and want them to be a member, the math doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you got to compromise. And where you get to with that, I'm not quite sure.
Right. And it appears like the next question that I would have asked you, Bob, because this is the number one thing that was crossing my mind where you were just talking, is like, why are we at this impasse, and who really feels like they're being more stubborn in this, right? Like, we appear to be at it's kind of a game of chicken, right? And there appears to be a bit of a standstill where both sides have dug their heels in. Who do you think is more pliable, right? Who appears more, who wants this deal to happen more, I guess, is the most elementary way that I would phrase this question.
It's a great question, because I don't know who wants it more. I think both sides need it.
Yeah, me too.
They say they don't, but they do. The tour needs it because I'm sure they would like the money, for one thing.
By the way, the other thing I would add here, Bob, is I've spoken to people at the Strategic Sports Group. Everybody at the Strategic Sports Group made that investment expecting to partner with the PIF. Okay, the Strategic Sports Group guys, those hedge fund guys like Mark Lazary and John Henry and all those guys, they invested that $3 billion expecting for the PIF to also invest money in the PGA Tour's product. Their plan, the way that what's so crazy about this is the way that Rory is talking right now is acting like now that they have the SSG money, they're good, when all of the people at the Strategic Sports Group that made that investment all did that because they were expecting a deal to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of this is negotiating, some of this is just talk, but you're right. The part of the lure of them getting involved was those guys want access to the PIF for other means.
Big time.
And so there's other things involved there, and I'm sure they want them involved, not only for the money, but for the relationships. But, the tour, I think, do they want to risk that somewhere down the road, the PIF will go rogue and start going after players again? I mean, and if you don't have a deal, I don't see how the tour relaxes its rules. How do you let these guys play tour events without a deal? It would have to be a very narrow deal. It'd have to be a handful, because you're not going to let them become members. They're not going to be able to be members, really. So the tour needs it for that reason. I think for the investment, to bring the game back together, get these guys playing together more often. The PIF needs it because I believe that their credibility sort of lies with getting the PGA Tour's blessing, so to speak, to exist as they are. And they have headwinds as it is. They have a hard time getting sponsorship. There's people afraid of doing business with them because they're concerned it might hurt them with the PGA Tour.
Correct.
If they're cooperative, in theory, you're not scheduling your events this week. You're working together on a schedule so that the Players Championship stands alone. And in theory, it would allow for a couple of their guys to play in it. And then you have the tour has to concede that on some weeks, I don't mean to pick on anybody. They're picked on a lot, but say you said the John Deere week, that is a LIV week.
Yeah.
LIV gets top billing. The John Deere will still be on TV, and its players can still go there and have a playing opportunity, but perhaps the TV rights fee and the sponsorship fee is lessened.
Yeah.
So that the sponsor knows what it's getting, and maybe somebody else steps in and helps LIV. LIV is $25 million purses every week. The tour's purses are covered by TV and a title sponsor. LIV's are not. It's a cash drain every week. You're not going to ever get to a point of even breaking even without some major sponsorship and a TV rights deal that's better. The Fox one, I've been told, is modest. What does that mean? Maybe it covers their production costs. That's not insignificant. That's millions of dollars, but it doesn't cover their purse. They have no sponsorship to cover the purse. Now, look, in Singapore this week, the government there is helping subsidize them. They have a tourism board. They've invested. A lot of these foreign countries and tourism boards have invested money in LIV Golf to bring them there. Whether that is coming anywhere close to covering the purse, I doubt. But let's say it was $15 or $20 million. That's significant, obviously, but there's still a huge bridge to cross to get to being even just where they are not losing money every week. So I think they need the tours, the credibility that the tour brings them. That's why they need a deal. Plus, Yasser, the governor of the PIF, would get a seat on the PGA Tour board as part of this.
Yeah.
That's huge. He would have a say in decisions going forward. He would get to meet with the leaders of the other majors. Like, I would think he wants this. And that will help them in other ways. Maybe Aramco, the Saudi oil company, becomes a presenting sponsor, or a title, or not a title, but a sponsor at the Open or the U.S. Open, or even maybe they sponsor the Signature Series. There's a million things you can think of here that are easy for me to do, when it's not my money and I'm not in the room. But there's so many things that they could do if they brought them in and brought them together. And again, this is all within the realm of golf, forgetting about there's a lot of geopolitical issues in play.
Yeah.
That are hard for a golf writer to wrap his arms around. But just from the golf standpoint, to get this to work, I think the bottom line is there needs to be some more compromise that we're not seeing.
The other point that I would add from a pure golf standpoint, and this would be my pushback to Rory saying that the PGA Tour doesn't need a deal. I disagree with this. I think the PGA Tour does need a deal, even if some of the ratings have been a little bit better recently, even if they think that TGL is super additive to getting more eyeballs on the PGA Tour and its stars. I think the problem with the PGA Tour just saying, hey, we're good guys, is that I still don't think that you could get up there and tell fans that we don't care about the talent that has gone to LIV, and we don't care about getting those guys back, and we're completely good on our presentation of the best players in the world playing the signature events. My personal opinion, Bob, and I could, for example, like my mom works at Snapchat, right? And to her, Bryson DeChambeau is a needle mover. Like Bryson DeChambeau has one of the fastest growing YouTube channels on the platform. This guy is incredibly valuable to places like Instagram and Snapchat, and at worst, one of the 10 best players in the world. And I don't think that just because people don't watch Bryson on LIV, that doesn't mean that he would, under the right hands, be a tremendous asset to the PGA Tour. Here's the problem with LIV, and here's why I don't think it's Bryson's fault or Rahm's fault for that matter that people aren't watching them on LIV. I think most people made up their minds about LIV a long time ago, right? This is not a startup, okay? We are in its 4th year in terms of the format, the teams. And I don't think anyone in year 4 is saying to themselves, whether or not Bryson won a US Open, is now saying to themselves, okay, after 3 years of the cliques and the fireballs, this is the year that I'm actually going to become a Majestics fan, right? Like most people, most golf fans and LIV have already made up their minds. And I don't think that just because LIV hasn't landed with the golf public that Jay Monahan can go up there and say to fans that we don't need the players on LIV. I don't think that's good governship, in my opinion, or leadership.
Again, I think if they're saying that, they don't really mean it, or it's a negotiating ploy. Of course, they need Bryson to play in PGA Tour events. They need Rahm. They need Koepka. They need Cam Smith, who won the Players 3 years ago.
Right.
They need they need Tyrrell Hatton. There's a few others. Neiman. There's probably 8-10 guys over there that would help. And they would imagine the boon it would be every time one of them played in a PGA Tour event, just because of what's going on. So that part of it, yeah, would be really important if they could get that. On the other hand, I think you have to allow LIV, if they are intent on doing what they're doing, you have to find a way to help them become profitable, or at least break even. And how do you do that? By you opening up.
I worry that ship has sailed, Bob. I mean, what can change about the league if they're not willing to do a complete 180 on some of their formatting and a rebrand that could make LIV profitable? I think LIV could become more respectable and appealing to certain golf fans, but I mean, they're in a $5 billion hole.
I don't think they care about that. I think it's from whatever point forward, breaking even or
Sure.
turning a small profit needs to be the goal. How do you get there? One of the ways is you sell the franchises.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be far more appealing if there's no cloud hanging over all of this. If they can sell TGL franchises, why can't you sell LIV franchises for something that's real golf? Like it's not indoor golf, it's not simulator golf, it's real golf. Now, again, people like to mock their format, 54 holes and the shotgun. That might not be your thing, but I don't really think that is the impediment to their success. I think they might have pushed the team idea on us too quickly.
I think it's a little impediment. I do. I think that there are a lot of true blue golf fans that are just never going to be able to get behind the team aspect.
That probably not. And what's the overhaul? Like, do you make it just about team competition, match play, or whatever? But yet the game is played at stroke play mostly at the pro level. And again, this is regressing here, but I think they made a mistake in abandoning their attempt to get world ranking points.
Mm-hmm.
I think they should have taken the steps necessary and just badgered the OWGR. What do we need to do to comply? They were given some parameters. They can do what they want. They could go to 60 players. They could have a weekly team of qualifiers. They could have a PGA Tour team sub in. Now, if they had a deal, I could see a thing where every team has 6 guys, allowing some of their name guys to skip 2 events and work some players in. Have a PGA Tour team, and have the TGL teams on the PGA Tour rotate into LIV events. And I know the true blue LIV fans say, yeah, but that messes up with the team championship thing. So what? That's where you have to think differently about what they're doing, because they seem to be committed to playing, their guys want to still play stroke play events.
Yeah.
The top players want to play stroke play events. It's what prepares them for the biggest tournaments. So again, I would think they'll never admit it, but if you're Bryson, if you're Rahm, it would be far better for them to play 8 live events, have the ability to play a few PGA Tour events and DP World events. It better prepares them for the majors, and it keeps the core of what they've tried to build in place.
What did you find over the past couple of days on the potential of LIV? Obviously, we know it's not going to happen anymore. LIV has a scheduled event this week on the other side of the world, but what did your reporting look like in terms of the potential for LIV players competing in something like the Players Championship? I mean, what would that have looked like? Did you get the sense that LIV players or people on LIV were very receptive to this idea?
That's the part I don't know how far it got. Like, I don't know if it ever got taken to the PIF. It was an idea discussed on the tour side and down to the level of they would invite 4 players based on having won majors or some other criteria and add them to the field. They would not have taken away any spots from PGA Tour members.
Yeah, that sounds very reasonable to me, by the way.
This week's field is 144. They would have made it 148. And my guess is you'd have had Koepka, Rahm,
Cameron Smith,
Cam Smith, and Bryson.
Yeah.
And so, what about Hatton? Well, he hasn't won a major.
Yeah. But Hatton would have been cool. He finished runner-up at the Players the year before he went to LIV.
Yeah. I mean, so did Paul Casey at a high finish, Neiman. But anyway, but I don't think it ever got beyond the stage of they were kicking around and willing to do that. But it was like 6 months ago. To be honest with you, I don't think they formally took it to the PIF. If they did and the PIF still scheduled an event this week, well, then that's not a great sign if they did. But I don't know for sure that they did. But I know we were all surprised when we saw their schedule and we're like, wait a minute, you're playing up against Pebble Beach. You're playing up against
Sawgrass.
I'm sorry. They played against they played against Phoenix and Torrey Pines, a Riviera Tigers event.
Yeah, which are like two of the PGA Tour's probably most watched events, I would say. Yeah. Right
now, of course, they were 8-10 hour different time change, but still, it's a lot to ask people to consume both. And then they played last week and this week, so obviously 10-12 hours apart. But still, it obviously when you did that, there was going to be no chance that these guys were going to be able to play here. And I've heard people say, well, if they should be able to play with it. No, they have contracts to play for LIV. You have to understand that, they do have to play their events. That's the rules. Okay. Yeah. I think if you're going to, if you want the LIV people to respect the fact that, hey, you have to play 15 events on the PGA Tour, then you have to respect that they have to play 14. I do find it ironic that the people on the LIV side talk about all the time about guys should be able to play wherever they want outside the PGA Tour, but nobody's allowed to play. You have to play those events. Their model is we only have 14. You have to play them all. The Tour's model is we have 3 times that number of events. We're asking you to play a third of them. And frankly, like I said before, 5 of them are the majors and the Ryder Cup. So it's really only 10. 10 out of like 42 events is all you're required to play. That is, to me, when you boil that down, that is not restrictive. So, and if you lessened it, you hurt your sponsors and TV.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hey, Bob, what's the temperature in the room right now of a Jay Monahan press conference? What are your predictions for tomorrow? Do you have anything that you're exciting to ask him? I mean, where do you think media's at right now with Jay Monahan, and how do you expect that press conference to go tomorrow?
I think it's going to be tough because we talked to him last Tuesday at Bay Hill too.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's going to be much different. I have a sense that part of it, him doing that, was to diffuse some of the talk about the deal. And when he starts to go down the road of talking about the deal and not giving much information, you're not going to just keep beating it to death if you can't, so he's going to probably, he's going to filibuster for a while on the strides the tour's made, the sponsors they've re-signed. He might talk a little bit about what the tour championship might look like. There's been a lot of rumblings about the tour championship changing formats. He'll get questions about this. He might get questions about the ball rollback, but I would be surprised if there's any definitive news on the deal front at this point. It doesn't seem like in a week's time anything could have changed much.
What are you most excited to ask him? Like, if you could get Jay Monahan in a room alone and force fed him with truth serum, what would be the number one thing that you would want to talk to him about? And I'm saying, put aside the fact that we know that he's not going to answer most questions, but in a perfect world, if you could really get some true honesty out of him, what would you really want to know about what's going on behind the scenes there?
What does a deal look like?
Yeah.
What does it mean for LIV? It's the question that.
And when is it going to happen, right?
Well, sure, but like when it does, what will it look like? How does it work? You're talking about bringing back a handful of players. You're not saying how they are going to exist, but yet you're gonna get $1 billion+ from them. They've made it clear that they are not going away. How does that work? If there is no deal, what's your plan to bring any of their players back? Like, if there's no deal, are they shut out completely? That doesn't help the fans.
Yeah.
I think the reason you mentioned earlier, the TV ratings, they're better this year than last year. There's been a lot of good things this year. Roy winning at Pebble Beach really helped.
Yeah.
Ludwig winning at Torrey Pines was great. The Phoenix was a great tournament. But the bottom line is the numbers are still lower than they were 4 or 5 years ago.
Big time.
There's a lot of people that have left and not come back. And, I don't think that's changing until they know that this is cleared up, because they just, they're tired of it. They're tired of the bickering. They're tired of all the money talk. Let's be honest. It's probably, while I was on the side of believing 5-6 years ago that the top players were undercompensated in golf because there were no guarantees. And just to back up, I always have made the argument. I use Tiger as the argument. This has nothing to do with endorsement money, because obviously they make a lot, but so does Steph Curry. But Steph Curry is guaranteed a lot of money because he's Steph Curry. Tiger Woods was never guaranteed a lot of money because he was Tiger Woods. He was guaranteed to make a lot of money because he was going to probably play well. But starting out on Thursday, if I was in the field and he was in the field, we were both at zero. I don't bring anything. He brought everything.
Yeah. And
there was that disconnect. And that sort of attitude started to gather steam among players and agents when the forerunner to LIV came along. This is 6, 8, 10 years ago. And now that it's here and there's been disruption, I think they've gone too far. Yeah. Like having 8 $20 million signature events, 2 playoff events that are that much, the Players Championship that's 25, and all that money at the Tour Championship, I'm not sure it's sustainable. No. It probably needs to be more like $15 million, and they needed to inch their way up to 20. Yeah. And so that's the other thing. Will there be a correction at any point in this?
In a free market, you would expect there to be some sort of correction. It felt like there was an overcorrection and the pendulum swung too far in terms of golfers being undercompensated. To now, you could probably make the argument that professional golf may have particularly if you look at the amount of money that LIV has invested, which you can't really look at from a rational standpoint, right?
It's not commercially viable.
Yeah,
what they're doing.
They're not playing by the same rules as everyone. No. I understand all of that, no. But golf probably has the least amount of self-awareness from a professional standpoint in terms of how their players are getting paid to how many eyeballs that they're actually bringing in. I mean, does the Masters outrate a preseason NFL game? It's pretty close, right? I mean, that's probably what we're looking at here. The grand point being is that like you have golfers that are making 5-10x the amount of certain NFL players that are bringing a lot more revenue and eyeballs into their respective sports.
The difference is that before all of this, look, golf is a niche sport, and there's two things. One is it doesn't have a big audience.
It doesn't, and it certainly doesn't have a big enough audience for two leagues, Bob.
No, it doesn't. Well, most sports don't.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like that's why we only have one NFL. That's why the NBA and the ABA merged all those years ago. It's hard to compete, and plus you don't want the talent spread out. So, but in golf, the reason golf always worked was the advertisers knew they didn't have a big audience, but they had their demographic. It's why you had Buicks and Cadillacs and insurance companies and banking companies as your sponsors who were willing to support a sport that didn't get a huge audience, but it got the type of people they were looking to reach. It's perfect. Well, what's happened is that, just like all of our sports, streaming, we demand more. I kind of get a kick out of it when I hear, why isn't the golf on right now? It'll be 10 in the morning. How come nobody's showing the golf? Why is the Golf Channel not showing golf? Probably because it's incredibly cost prohibitive.
Mm-hmm.
They've got it's all that acreage to cover. You've got to pay those people. And, oh, by the way, you have to pay the tour a rights fee to show it. Mm-hmm. And even if the tour waived it, like how many people are watching to get your return? And then it's like, oh, my God, there's so many commercials. Well, it's really expensive to televise golf. And there's no like natural ad breaks.
And you can't compare it to LIV because LIV doesn't have to play by any of those rules.
No, and I mean, look, what LIV is doing, with limited commercials, and obviously they have a 5-hour window. 5 hours is expensive to televise golf. It's just a lot. There's a reason why it was a small window before, and obviously we've gotten into this world now where, we want to see it all. But when you do that, you also dilute the audience. You stretch them out. Nobody's going to be able to watch for 8 hours, So I'm sympathetic to TV when it comes to the complaints. Obviously, we'd all like it to be better. We don't want so many commercials, but you have to understand, how are they supposed to pay for it? The tour extracts a huge rights fee, and now they have to try to make that back. And if the ratings aren't good, they have to do makeup ads. And it's expensive. So, are the players going to take less money if the tour takes less in rights fees? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So it all trickles down. I mean, if you're upset about too many commercials or that sort of thing, which of course we're all frustrated by, you really have to kind of look at the landscape. It's because it's how you pay those purses.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, you've been super generous with your time already. I know you got a bunch going on this afternoon to get to, but give me one or two more things you're buzzing on at Sawgrass this week. Who are you interested to watch? What are you interested to follow? I mean, what other press conferences and narratives and storylines are you fascinated to track this week at Sawgrass?
Yeah, I'm sort of interested to see how Morikawa bounces back now.
Me too.
That was a tough one.
Yeah.
On Sunday. That was a big, tough pill after several close calls. I mean, and it didn't look like he did a whole lot wrong. It happens. You're going to make some bogeys. But all of a sudden you're one shot ahead with 3 to go. You're on the green putting for birdie. Your opponent has a pretty tough chip. You're thinking, okay, maybe he'll get this up and down for birdie. At the worst, I'm tied. Or I'm still one ahead if I make mine, and he holes it on you. Yeah. And now you've got like 2 of the hardest holes on the golf course, not really birdie holes. So, he's been knocking on the door a lot here lately, and he hasn't been winning. So, I'm really sort of curious about him. There's a couple of others. Like I'm sort of curious to see if Max Homa bounces back. Yeah. Really been struggling. He misses the cut in a 72-player tournament with only only 20 guys missing last week. Been struggling for months. So that's those. I think those are two things I'm sort of interested in. And also I am sort of interested to hear more. There's been more talk about how's the Tour Championship going to change.
Yeah.
It sounds like they could do it for this year. If they get on the same page and come up with a format, it could get done in time for August. And I think we all realize, we gave this format a chance. I don't think it's worked. They need to do something else. There's nothing stopping you. Nobody's going to qualify any differently based on what the format is. You might as well try to have something in place.
Yeah. Well, I have to bring him up because I thought you were going to mention him as somebody that you were interested to follow as well. But we would be remiss not to at least mention the fact that Scheffler is going for his third Players in a row. He would be the first person to ever win 3 Players in a row. In fact, he was the first person to ever win 2 Players in a row. Where are you at on Scheffler right now? I mean, he's clearly not playing golf at the level that he was in 2024, but based on what I'm seeing from a numbers perspective, I'm not sure I would be ringing the alarm bells either. He's kind of in this interesting in-between zone right now where he's still playing some fantastically consistent golf. I mean, he hasn't finished outside of the top 15 in all 4 of his events this year, but clearly he's not coming close to contending at the rate that he was in 2024. Obviously an unsustainable pace, to be fair, but how do you feel about him after what you've seen from Scheffler in 2025 and his prospects over the next couple of months, both here and at the Masters coming up right around the corner?
Yeah, listen, last year at this time, all he had won was the Arnold Palmer.
Yeah.
He didn't win before that either. And, he kind of found something with his putting at the Arnold Palmer last year, which propelled him on. He changed putters. And then at the end of last year, he kind of went to the claw on the shorter putts. So, I thought he was going to pick right up where he left off, and then he has the injury, and I think we have to give him a little time. It's probably just not quite where he wants to be. And, if he doesn't win this week, I'm not so sure I'd be sounding the alarm bells either.
Yeah.
It just might be that he wins 3 or 4 times this year instead of 7, and that the wins come later.
Yeah.
So you're right. The fact that he's been so consistent still, I mean, coming back from that and not really, it would have been fine if he missed a cut even. I don't think it, but he didn't. He was just he's still kind of right there. Look, Xander, I think, has had more trouble. Like he just played the one tournament and he had a nice final round yesterday, but he struggled on Saturday and he struggled in the first round. So he's got more ground to make up. And I'm kind of curious about him too, because he won the last major, and if he was in form, there is going to be a ton of interest in him at the Masters.
Yeah. He almost won the Players too last year, for what it's worth. So it's not like this is a bad golf course for him by any means. He's got 2 runner-ups at Sawgrass. Okay. One name, Bob. Who's your 2025 Players champion? Who's the last man standing this week?
Oh boy. Let's see. Who did I kind of like there for a little while? I mean, I would have never guessed Russell Henley last week.
Yeah.
Right. I like Lowry the way he kind of keeps knocking on the door.
He's playing great. Yeah.
Good
golf course for him too. Like
it
really
is.
good for his accuracy off the tee, kind of that positional nature of the way he plays the game.
Yeah. It's not a golf course you have to bomb it off the tee at all.
No, definitely not. So I'm with you there. I like that pick. Bob, this is an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. How's the weather down there too? Have you got, I know you're local normally. You live in Florida, right? You're a Florida full-time guy?
Yeah, I live on the west coast of Florida. I live in Clearwater.
Okay.
So, this is It's supposed to be decent. We got a lot of rain here this morning, and it cooled off a good bit. But I believe as the week wears on, we're supposed to be fine. There's maybe a chance of rain one of the days, but I think they're in for a decent weather week. Certainly not going to be cold.
I hope we get some wind, man. I mean, last
Yeah.
year it played uncharacteristically easy. It was the lowest scoring average that we saw in the last decade of the players. So I'm somewhat selfishly hoping that the golf course firms up a little bit, and we see a little bit more wind this year. So hopefully we can hold off rain over the next couple of days. But anyway, Bob,
Great.
this is a pleasure as always. Hey, where can everyone find your work this week? Do you have any other stories or reporting coming out over the next couple of days that you want to shout out?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything that I'll just be writing live every day. SI.com, SI.com/golf. I'm on X at Bob Harig. I usually send my stuff out there. And so yeah, just sort of what comes. We'll see what comes. Like we didn't get Morikawa after the final round at the Arnold Palmer. I'm sort of curious to hear what he has to say this week before the tournament. How he's feeling after that tough one.
Yeah. Well, Bob, it was a pleasure as always. I'm a big fan of your reporting and love every time we have the opportunity to chat. So we'll do it again soon, my friend, and enjoy the golf this weekend.
Thanks a lot, Andy. I appreciate you having me on.